It said that if hell had a zip code, it would be somewhere in El Salvador, a place where the air smells like sweat, blood, and fear, where the sound of footsteps in a corridor could mean life or death, and where the world's most feared gangsters, killers, extortionists, and assassins now live behind the same walls. But this isn't just a prison. This is a weapon, a fortress so massive, so brutal, that human rights groups call it a cage built for war. Yet for El Salvador's President Nayib Bukele, it's something else entirely, justice served. Tonight, we go deep inside the Terrorism Confinement Center, better known as Secot, the most dangerous prison on earth. A place designed to hold 40,000 gang members, all locked inside with no lawyers, no visitors, and no mercy. But beneath the steel doors and propaganda videos, a darker truth is emerging, one that the government doesn't want the world to see. And it starts with a single question: what really happens inside the world's toughest prison? To understand why El Salvador built Secot, you have to go back to the bloodiest years in the country's modern history. The homicide rate had soared so high, the morgues were overflowing. Bodies dumped on the roadside became a daily sight. The culprits? Two of the deadliest gangs on the planet, MS-13 and Barrio 18. These weren't street thugs. They were paramilitary forces, armed, organized, and everywhere. They controlled entire neighborhoods. They taxed shopkeepers, kidnapped rivals, even dictated who could live or die in certain blocks. For decades, El Salvador's prisons were their headquarters. Gangs ran drug deals and hid operations from inside their cells using smuggled phones and corrupt guards. By 2022, President Bukele had had enough. He declared a state of exception, suspending constitutional rights, authorizing mass arrests, and vowing to crush the gangs once and for all. The world watched in disbelief as tens of thousands of tattooed men were rounded up, chained, and paraded for the cameras. But Bukele wasn't just locking them up. He was building something new, something that would terrify every gang member left on the streets. A prison so big, so isolated, and so unforgiving that it would become a symbol of fear itself. They called it Secot, Centro de Confinamiento del Terrorismo, built in a remote valley surrounded by mountains and forests. It's a modern fortress straight out of a dystopian film. 236 acres, 37 watchtowers, 8 massive cell blocks, every inch designed to make escape impossible. There are no windows, no contact with the outside world, and not a single prisoner has seen sunlight since the day they arrived. The inmates sleep on bare metal slabs. No mattresses, no pillows. They eat 2 meals a day, kneeling on the floor, hands behind their backs. Cameras track every move. Guards in black masks carry rifles and electric batons, watching from bulletproof walkways above. Inmates whisper that the walls themselves breathe fear, and in the center of it all, a 20-foot concrete wall separates rival gangs who once ruled the streets together. Now they rule nothing. When President Bukele first unveiled Secot to the world, he didn't do it quietly. He invited the cameras. He wanted every Salvadoran and every gang member hiding in the shadows to see what awaited them. A viral video was released by the government. It showed 2,000 half-naked inmates, their heads shaved, running in chains across the courtyard like a swarm of insects. Their tattoos, once marks of pride, now symbols of submission. The footage spread across social media like wildfire. Millions watched as the men were packed shoulder to shoulder in tight cells, forced to squat for hours as guards barked orders. For Bukele's supporters, it was a message of hope. For his critics, it was a warning. Human rights groups condemned the footage as dehumanizing. The government didn't care. Bukele called it the new El Salvador, a country where the gangs no longer rule, and fear now belongs to the criminals. But behind the propaganda, some say something much more sinister was happening inside those walls. At first, Secot seemed to work. Murders dropped by nearly 60%. The streets grew quieter. But then, strange reports began to leak out. Family members of inmates started receiving anonymous messages. Some claimed their sons had disappeared inside the prison, No records, no bodies, no answers. Others described screams echoing from the walls at night, prisoners collapsing during disciplinary sessions. One guard, who later fled the country, said that sometimes entire cell blocks would go silent for days. He claimed it wasn't just punishment, it was erasure. According to him, when the cameras stopped rolling, some inmates were taken to Sector Zero, a section of Sakot not listed on any blueprint. He described it as a place where even the guards are afraid to go. The government denied it exists, but the whispers kept spreading. And in a place where truth is locked away with the inmates, rumors are all that remain. Among the 40,000 prisoners inside Sakot, there's one man whose story no one can officially confirm. Yet every guard has heard his name whispered. They call him El Silencio, the Silence. According to rumor, he was once a high-ranking MS-13 commander, a man who turned on his own crew after a secret deal with the government went wrong. When the mass arrest began, Bukele's forces allegedly spared him. But something changed. A few months later, El Silencio vanished. He was never seen in the official prison intake videos. Yet, several new inmates claimed they met him inside Sakot. They said he was isolated, kept in a separate chamber under constant surveillance, never allowed to speak, never allowed to sleep more than 2 hours. Some said the guards treated him like a ghost, a warning of what happens to traitors. Others said he wasn't a prisoner at all, that he was working with the government, feeding information, breaking the will of other gang leaders from the inside. But if that's true, why did one of the guards who claimed to have seen him end up missing 3 weeks later? It's no secret that in El Salvador, gangs and politicians have shared dark alliances for decades. Before Bukele's crackdown, both MS-13 and Barrio 18 allegedly made secret truces with government officials, offering votes and peace in exchange for leniency and money. Documents later leaked by investigative journalists hinted that even Bukele's administration may have negotiated with gang leaders early on until those deals collapsed. If true, then Sakot isn't just a prison. It's a cover-up, a place to hide the very people who once made those deals possible, a place where witnesses vanish before they can talk. One human rights lawyer called it a black hole for truth. And when the government boasts of peace on the streets, he says it's because all the noise is now trapped behind those walls. Then, in early 2024, something unexpected happened. A smuggled phone video surfaced on the dark web. It was short, less than 40 seconds, but what it showed sent shockwaves through El Salvador. In the dim flicker of a fluorescent light, a man, thin, bald, covered in scars, looked into the camera and whispered, "Tell them El Silencio speaks." Before guards burst in, the camera dropped. End of clip. Analysts later compared the voice to a former MS-13 lieutenant who disappeared in 2022. If it was him, it meant only one thing. Someone inside Sakot had broken the silence. Within days, the government dismissed the footage as fake. The man who leaked was found dead in Guatemala. But the whispers didn't stop. In fact, they grew louder. Because now, everyone wanted to know what secret was so dangerous. It had to be buried inside the world's toughest prison. Her name was Lucia Andrade, a journalist who'd spent years investigating gang violence, corruption, and disappearances in El Salvador. She'd seen everything, from cartel executions to police death squads. But nothing haunted her like the rumors coming from inside Sakot. One night, she received a call from a restricted number. The voice on the other end was trembling. "I worked at Sakot," the man said, "and if you're smart, you'll stop asking questions." Lucia pressed him for proof. There was a pause, then he whispered something chilling. "They're not all gang members. Some of them, they were never supposed to be there." Before she could respond, the line went dead. That was the beginning of what would become her most dangerous story. Within days, she started receiving anonymous messages, coordinates, names, and one phrase that repeated over and over: "Find El Silencio." Lucia's first clue came from a whistleblower, a former construction engineer who helped design the Sakot complex. He handed her an encrypted flash drive, saying only, "Not everything they built is on paper." When she opened the files, she froze. Sekote's original blueprint showed 8 main blocks, 2 administrative zones, and a central control hub. But in a later version, signed off by the Defense Ministry, an entire underground level had been added. No name, no access points, just a code, Sector 0. The engineer said it wasn't supposed to exist. He claimed that during construction, only select military personnel were allowed near that section. He believed it was built for special containment. Others whispered a darker term, disappearing room. If this was true, then Sekote wasn't just a prison. It was a machine for erasing people. Lucia began digging into government data, public arrest logs, inmate transfers, military budgets. Everything pointed to one disturbing trend. Thousands of detainees had been logged as transferred to Sekote, but no one could confirm where inside. Their names vanished from records within days. She reached out to families of the missing. They all told the same story. Their sons were taken by police under the gang crackdown, but when they asked for proof of life, officials told them no such prisoner exists. Then she found something stranger, a pattern in the deleted entries. Each vanished inmate's ID ended with a Z. Z, as in Sector 0. One night, Lucia received another anonymous message. It was a video clip, grainy, shaky, shot inside a narrow corridor lit by red emergency lights. The footage showed prisoners kneeling, hands tied, surrounded by masked guards. But it was the voice behind a camera that made her blood run cold. "This is what happens in Sector 0, the voice whispered. "They bring the ones who talk and make them disappear." Lucia played it over and over. The accent, soft, deliberate, sounded eerily familiar. She checked her notes, old recordings, interviews. And then it hit her. It was the same voice from the earlier leak. El Silencio. Only this time, he wasn't whispering a warning. He was filming the evidence. Lucia studied the video frame by frame. At first, there was nothing, just flickering lights and muffled echoes. But buried deep in the static, she noticed something strange, a pattern of faint beeps and tones. She sent it to a friend, a sound engineer, who decoded it and called her immediately. "Lucia," he said, "this isn't noise, it's coordinates." They pointed to a region near Tekaluka, a small forested area less than 5 miles from the official Sekote boundary. There shouldn't have been anything there, but satellite imagery told a different story. A patch of disturbed earth, freshly dug trenches, and military vehicles spotted at night. Lucia knew what it meant. Whatever Sector 0 was, it didn't stop at the prison walls. Determined to expose the truth, Lucia applied for an official media visit to Sekote. Her request was approved, surprisingly fast. When she arrived, a convoy of black armored trucks escorted her through multiple security checkpoints. Phones were confiscated. Cameras monitored every move. Inside, she met Warden Castillo, a tall, calm man with eyes that gave nothing away. He smiled politely. "Sekote," he said, "is the safest prison in the world. Our mission is order and discipline." But Lucia noticed something off. Every corridor she passed had fresh paint. Every inmate perfectly silent. It felt staged. Then, as she toured one of the main cell blocks, a faint sound echoed from below. It wasn't the clang of metal or footsteps. It was humming, low, mechanical, continuous, like the vibration of heavy machinery deep underground. When she asked what it was, the warden's smile faded. "Maintenance," he said flatly. "We keep the systems running." But Lucia saw it in his eyes. He was lying. Later that night, as her escort prepared to drive her back to the capital, a young soldier slipped her a folded piece of paper. He whispered, "If you want the truth, come alone. Midnight, Road 9, near the water tanks." Then he disappeared. Lucia hesitated, but curiosity, or maybe obsession, pushed her to go. She arrived at the meeting point under the dim orange glow of a distant floodlight. A man stepped out of the shadows, face covered. "You're looking for Sector 0, he said. "It's not what you think." Lucia asked who he was. Someone who used to guard the ghosts, he replied. He told her that beneath Secot, there's an entire network of tunnels connecting to a secret compound in the forest, a place where high-profile inmates are taken for reconditioning. He described seeing prisoners strapped to metal chairs, forced to watch footage of their crimes for hours, while loudspeakers repeated government slogans on a loop. Those who break, he said, are either turned into informants or never seen again. Before he left, he handed her a memory card. Whatever happens, he said, don't trust the ones in uniform. Lucia returned home and immediately loaded the memory card. What she saw left her shaking. The first clip showed a narrow tunnel lined with fluorescent lights. Water dripped from the ceiling. At the end of the passage, a heavy steel door with the engraving, Sector 0. Inside, rows of men sitting motionless, eyes wide open, heads shaved clean, each with metal bands strapped around their necks connected to a central console. Monitors displayed images of President Bukele's speeches, intercut with footage of violence, propaganda, and flashing lights. And among them, a familiar face, the gaunt, hollow-eyed man she'd seen in the earlier leaks, El Silencio. He looked directly into the camera and mouthed two words that would haunt her forever. Help us. Then the footage cut to black. Lucia knew she couldn't keep the evidence to herself. She backed it up, prepared to release it through international outlets. But before she could, her apartment was raided in the middle of the night. Neighbors said they saw men in unmarked uniforms. Lucia's computer, phone, and documents were all taken. She was never seen again. The government issued a brief statement. Journalist Lucia Andrade left the country voluntarily, but her passport was later found in her apartment, next to a broken hard drive. Days later, her encrypted backup went live automatically. The video of Sector 0 spread across encrypted forums, then leaked to the public. Within 48 hours, the government blocked over 200 websites, but it was too late. The world had seen it, and for the first time, the myth of El Salvador's perfect prison began to crack. Months later, in a refugee camp near Honduras, a man showed up claiming to have escaped Secot. He was thin, limping, with scars across his wrists. When asked how he got out, he smiled weakly. "You don't escape Secot," he said. "Secot lets you go." He claimed he was one of the original detainees sent to Sector 0, and that the goal wasn't punishment. It was control. According to him, the government used psychological torture to turn certain prisoners into state operatives. They were trained, brainwashed, and redeployed under new identities, not as inmates, but as enforcers. His story was impossible to verify, but when journalists checked his fingerprints, they matched a man officially listed as deceased in the prison registry. That man's name? Raul Diaz, alias El Silencio. Months later, in a refugee camp near Honduras, a man showed up claiming to have escaped Secot. He was thin, limping, with scars across his wrists. When asked how he got out, he smiled weakly. "You don't escape Secot," he said. "Secot lets you go." He claimed he was one of the original detainees sent to Sector 0, and that the goal wasn't punishment. It was control. According to him, the government used psychological torture to turn certain prisoners into state operatives. They were trained, brainwashed, and redeployed under new identities, not as inmates, but as enforcers. His story was impossible to verify, but when journalists checked his fingerprints, they matched a man officially listed as deceased in the prison registry. That man's name? Raul Diaz, alias El Silencio. After the leaks, the world was furious. Human rights groups demanded investigations. The United Nations called for access to Secot. But inside El Salvador, something stranger happened. Instead of outrage, many citizens celebrated. "Let them rot." One man said on camera. Another added, "We finally have peace." For the first time in decades, people could walk through gang-controlled neighborhoods without fear. Extortion rates dropped. Businesses reopened. To the public, President Bukele was a hero, a man who had done the impossible. But behind the perfect image of safety, a silent transformation was taking place. Police no longer feared the gangs. The gangs no longer feared prison. Everyone now feared the state. Weeks after the refugees' interview, documents surfaced from an anonymous government insider detailing something called Proyecto Silencio. It wasn't just a prison initiative. It was a psychological warfare program. According to the leaked files, certain high-ranking gang members were chosen for rehabilitation through neuroconditioning and sensory deprivation. They were stripped of identity, subjected to looping propaganda, then rebuilt with new directives to infiltrate what remained of the criminal network and eliminate it from within. They called these reprogrammed men the Silence. But the line between control and madness blurred quickly. Some broke down completely. Others embraced their new programming too well. And at least one, codenamed Raul Diaz, alias El Silencio, disappeared after the final phase. Officially, he died during a transfer, but the insider claimed otherwise. He said El Silencio was released. A year later, strange things began happening in San Salvador. Former gang hideouts were found burned to the ground. Entire crews vanished overnight. Survivors whispered of a man, tall, pale, with a burn scar on his neck, who moved through the city like a ghost. They called him El Hombre Sin Voz, the man without a voice. Police found no fingerprints, no records, just graffiti left at the scenes. A single mark, a circle with a line through it, the same symbol carved into the walls of Sector Zero. When journalists tried to investigate, officials denied everything. But privately, one high-ranking officer admitted, there are operations we don't control anymore. Not all of them answer to us. If true, then the very experiment meant to destroy the gangs had created something worse. A new, untraceable power born from inside the prison walls. Late one night, during an international summit, a hacked document was leaked to multiple news outlets. It was an internal memo from the Office of the Presidency, marked Eyes Only. The memo referred to successful reactivation of Silencio units. It praised autonomous counterinsurgency actions and authorized further containment protocols for rogue assets. Buried in the margins was a handwritten note. If they stop obeying, shut down Sacote. No witnesses. The handwriting, analysts confirmed, matched that of President Nayib Bukele. The government dismissed it as a deepfake, but satellite data the same week showed a sudden blackout at the Sacote facility, followed by explosions detected in a nearby forest. Officially, it was routine maintenance. Unofficially, it was the beginning of a purge. 2 days after the Sacote blackout, a video appeared on a private journalist network in Mexico City. It showed a figure standing in the shadows, his face partially burned, his voice distorted through static. My name was Raul Diaz, he said. I was born in San Salvador. I joined MS-13 when I was 12. The government erased me. They made me into something else. He paused, breathing heavily. We are not free. Not the criminals. Not the guards. Not even the people outside. Sacote isn't a prison, it's a seed. And it's already growing. He stepped closer to the camera. His left eye twitched, and for a moment, his pupils flickered with the reflection of moving code, binary patterns flashing across the lens. They think they can control us, he whispered. But the silence has learned to speak. The feed cut to black. In the following weeks, Sacote was sealed off completely. Government drones patrolled the perimeter. No journalists, no visitors, no explanations. Families of inmates were told their relatives had been transferred. No further details were given. The warden, Castillo, vanished without a trace. So did half of a security team. Official state media claimed Sacote was under renovation, but satellite images revealed something else. Heavy machinery demolishing large sections of the prison, while armed convoys moved crates into underground vaults. Among those crates were metal pods, each marked with a single identifier, S00 to S40. 40 pods, 40,000 inmates, and one silence that refused to die. Months later, strange new footage began circulating on encrypted channels. Night vision clips of black-clad men conducting raids across Central America. Their faces were covered. Their tactics, identical to elite military operations. But what unsettled analysts most was the insignia on their vests, a circle with a line through it. Governments denied involvement. Interpol called them ghost cells. But survivors from the raid said something chilling. They didn't speak, not one word, but they moved like they knew everything about us. When asked who they were, one terrified witness whispered, they came from prison. In 2025, an encrypted database was anonymously leaked to international agencies. It contained classified communications between El Salvador's National Security Office and private defense contractors. The files revealed a program expansion called Silencio. 2. A joint initiative to replicate Sacote's behavioral reformation model in other countries. Blueprints for new facilities were already in progress. In Honduras, Guatemala, and Colombia, each modeled after Sacote, each with its own Sector Zero, and buried in the metadata of the leak, a digital signature. One word, Silencio. A year later, a drone pilot captured unauthorized footage of the ruins of Sacote after its official shutdown. Amid the collapsed concrete and twisted steel, a single message was spray-painted on a remaining wall. The silence ends when they start listening. No one knows who wrote it. No one knows where El Silencio is now. But one thing is certain. The legacy of Sacote didn't die with its prisoners. It evolved, and somewhere in the dark corners of power, men are still building more cages, not for criminals, but for control. Because the scariest thing about the world's toughest prison is not what happens inside its walls, but what it teaches those who built it. This is the story of Sacote, a monument to fear, a machine of silence, and a mirror of what happens when justice turns into vengeance. If you believe power should never go unchecked, share this story, because some prisons aren't made of concrete. They're built from lies, and we're all living inside one.